In terms of the kind of what is the negative, of course, there is issues we would have wanted to be resolved in Cancun or go one step further. One of those is the markets. But I think when you look at the markets debate over the last years, let's say it was really the Damocles sword hanging above that market, because there were so many parties in the room who were saying, we don't believe in markets. We don't think that markets is the right thing. That's your philosophy, but it's not our philosophy. So I think we are quite happy that there is not a decision saying, close the markets. It's not something that can help to solve the climate problem. It's just the other way around. We have something in the decision that says we are going to take this forward. And I take the invitation from Alstom. We will be pushing forward in terms of proposals, how to do that, and how to take that forward. So I think there is more than, let's say, in these decisions. We come with the usual cynicism and say, okay, the only decision was that these officials, they can continue their circus and they can travel next year another 4 times around the world. But I think that misses the point quite a lot. And I think by raising those voices, we do injustice to what happened in Cancun. I think the process in the run-up to Cancun was magnificently different from the process we had seen the year before. I think there was a huge difference in that. And we hope that this is going to continue like that the momentum that has been gathered in Cancun, we can maintain and roll forward to Durban.
Can you say maybe 2-3 words about the process, or is it too early to speculate already how do we get to Durban and what would be the next key steps?
I think in terms of process, what was decided in Cancun is that there is many things on the work program where a lot of detail needs to be hammered out, and I think that's probably 80% of the work that we are going to do during the course of next year. So it will be very technical, very down to earth. A lot of experts will have to travel during the course of the year in order to hammer those details out. I'm sure there will be extra meetings of those ad hoc working groups. I propose, or I presume there will be 2. The dates of those have not been fixed. There's a bureau meeting the week after next week where there will be a discussion on when and where this is going to take place. But it's kind of a similar arrangement as we have seen before. We'll have the intersessional in Bonn in June, and we will have the COP in Durban, probably in autumn also a meeting, an extra meeting on the AWGs.
Okay, now can we go to the second question, and this is something which is very much on the mind of many of the Brussels stakeholders. There was no agreement on targets, clearly. So there will be, or will there be a gap without the Kyoto-style emissions reductions targets after 2012? Or what kind of gap will there be, and how can we deal with it? Now, if you say, Kyoto is still alive and kicking, yes, we could then imagine that at some stage there will be a follow-up. The EU has, talked about this, but still the situation remains that a country like Japan and a lot of others don't want to go further there. Arthur, can you kick off and then
yes.
Henry?
I think the issue of the gap refers very much to, in terms of the legal, in the end of 2012, let's say the current international targets expire, and then there's a question, what comes next? And I agree that there could be a gap. That risk is there, because we are coming close to Durban, and we don't know exactly, will we have another Annex B or not? So that's de jure. But then if you look de facto we have pledges. De facto we have pledges by all industrialized countries and by all the major emerging economies. Then the question comes, how do these industrialized countries want to fulfill their pledges? On the EU side is already very clear. Our 20% package mimics Kyoto. It takes up all the major elements of Kyoto, whether it's the flexible mechanisms in order to fulfill your targets under the ETS. Our companies will be allowed to use CDM credits in order to honor their obligations. So de facto, Kyoto continues. Of course, it's a matter of choice whether Japan, whether the Russian Federation, whether other countries want to use the flexible mechanisms in one way or the other. I think what we have seen in Cancun, and I think that was quite informative, because there was an attempt to get a sentence into the decisions to say everything will continue after 2012 on Kyoto. Of course, the first thing that happened after somebody made that proposal is the flag of Bolivia went up and said everything should stop on the 31st of December 2012. You should only be allowed to use those mechanisms if you have ratified a second commitment period. And I think that thing you will not be able to bridge. So to ask for a formal decision to say it will continue de jure in the UN context isn't, because there is a lot of, it's seen as part of, okay, my strategy is not to allow you to do that because that's an incentive for you to then sign up to CP2. But I think it's not that easy in terms of negotiations. And I think the negotiation strategy of Bolivia, I don't know whether a colleague from Bolivia is here in the room, miserably failed, I believe.
Not taking away the ammunition from Henry, but if you say the Kyoto kind of targets are now replaced by the pledges, why do we need the Kyoto Protocol? A second commitment period.
It's a question to me or to Henry?
Yeah, it's also to you. It's also to you.
No, I think, let's say, the reason why we would want to continue in an international legal framework is because it gives certainty. Somebody was talking about, okay, if you have different regional markets, how do you link up with them? Of course, it's much easier and has much less transaction cost to do that through an international UN system, instead of doing it piecemeal, every region does whatever it likes. I think that is something that private sector definitely will hate. Of course, we all know that we can trade 1,000 different kinds of apples around the world. That's not a problem. But let's say when it comes to carbon trading, it will increase the transaction costs, and it makes the whole thing much more expensive. So from that point of view, we are in favor of continuing an international legal framework. For us to say the pledges are the end, no, that's not what I said. I said the pledges are the beginning. We want to see their implementation, but we want to continue further to move towards an international legal framework. Let's say we haven't given up on our final objective in the EU. And I think many with us in the negotiations want to continue. And that's part of the Cancun agreements as well. It clearly says the discussion on the legal framework has to continue.
Henry, do you want to comment?
Well, I heard Arthur say, I think, that de facto Kyoto continues, and I find that remarkable, because the whole point of Kyoto was the point that the world comes together and agrees a system for agreeing collectively what levels of emissions reduction are appropriate, given the principles that laid out in the convention, and principles probably yet to be, I hope, yet to be added to that. And there is all the difference in the world between a pledge system and an internationally legally binding system. Mm-hmm. It may very well be that an internationally legally binding system was always rather too far for us to attempt to go on this increasingly difficult subject. But there is no doubting that there is a huge difference. And it's a difference that means obviously a lot, not just to lawyers and to governments, at least I hope it means something to governments, but to business as well. Because the existence of an international system was intended to give some sort of defense to countries and the industries of countries against the accusation that there was unfairness, that there was potential for leakage on the basis of no principle other than smart negotiation